business partnering with Jack effectively and why? Yeah, this is a start to the conversation. So let's go to this far table here to the left. Give us your responses.
And most important, BP need to think about, every time think about business impact versus the individual interests.
The integrity as a business partner who handling between business versus personal. So that's the major concern.
All right. So to your point, it's sort of over partnering. Is that really a partnering? And what does partnering actually require when you think about the actual definition of what we're trying to accomplish? We'll come back to that, but just sort of planting the seed. Yes, this table.
We think
Yes?
Business partner is not a yes man, but the consultant.
Okay. Very good. So what's on the consultant? Yes.
We think he's more of a doer and executor rather than the partner.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's more on the taking order and on what customer needs, rather than the telling something, being a consultant, or that you bring in different views.
Positives. Any positives?
I see like positive things.
Two positives.
Yeah,
Okay,
one
good.
is that he has a collaboration capability with the corporate guys.
Yeah.
These are very, it's not maybe not a market practice, but he can get it now.
Don't try to be a Superman. Don't do that. Right? Only Superman has the right to put the underwear outside. So with your peers and your working group, that's very critical in your success. That will guarantee you more success and better support to the business. Right? Let's go a bit into a bit of theory. Right? Let's go to the next slide. So out of strategic business partnering, okay, let's stop here. So when you talk about effective business partnering, it's a continuum, right? How effective we are is a scale that you go up. And you have certain prerequisites for you to be effective business partnering from a concept and theory perspective, but these are real practical experiences that we go through. Can we build the next one? Doing strategic business work. One of the things we need to make sure we do is do strategic business work. Strategic means adding value. Keep that in mind. It's not a vision kind of thing. It could be just making sure that people get paid correctly, or it could be situations where people cost center changes are done effectively. It's the simplest way to do it. And then going into the next bill, which is providing holistic business solution. So if you do strategic business work and you provide a holistic solution to the problem that you're solving, you are actually building your effective business partnering. Right? Now for you to achieve that, how do you achieve that? It sounds very conceptual, right? Now how do you build that up? Next slide. Build again. The first fundamental thing you need to do is systematically delivering your core HR services. Right? It's like levels that you go through. Now, can you have a strategic conversation with the business if you cannot deliver your fundamentals correctly or not? That's what John got into, right? John could never get into any conversations because the core HR services are basically not there. So, getting the core services is strategic, right? Next bill. Consulting that improves business effectiveness. Once you have the core, then we talk about improving your business effectiveness. Providing the consulting itself becomes the next bill. Next bill. And then once you get from consulting, then providing solutions that make strategic business impact. Decisions that allows them to add value to the business and impactful. That is what is going to build into the next level of the continuum of effectiveness. And then the final bill is basically ownership of that makes strategic business impact. So owning it is very critical. Right? Trying to say that I'm going to come in and just do consulting and move away, it is not going to be helpful. Now, the next question is, how do we go up this continuum? It's not going to be easy, right? When you look at it, it looks very conceptual, logical. But how do you get from that? So that goes to our practical application of it. Next slide. First bill. When you start your work as a business partner, whether you're a COE or whether you're a business partner, HR business partner, or anybody, what happens to you in the beginning when you interact with the customers? The customers ask you a lot of questions, correct or not? What's the policy? How many leaves we have? Do you have the right system in place? Why is our cycle time taking such a long time? And then at the end of the day, they get fed up telling us or asking us questions, and they say that, I want you to do it in 10 days. I want you to do it in 15 days. So we get into this scenario. Anybody have not experienced this? All of us experience that, right? So what do we do? So the next build is, when we get into that, we start building our core HR services, the foundation, the policies, the procedures, the process flows. Make sure that those are foundationally strong. Now you see there's a word called core HR services. So it doesn't mean you need to get 100% of your services perfect. You need to get the core ones perfect. You need to prioritize what is important and what is critical. Now once you get your core foundation built, then the next build comes in, which is people start listening to you. Right? Once your foundation is there, people sit down and say that, okay, I have no more questions to ask. I got nothing to tell because we have everything in place. Now I'm starting to listen to you. Right? So whatever you say in terms of policies and procedures, people will start listening. And once they start listening, then what you will see is that you are in a position to provide consulting that improves business effectiveness. You are in a position, you might not be doing it. So you need to start thinking about, how do I provide consulting that adds value to the business, that improves their effectiveness. And once the business feels that that consulting is improving their business effectiveness, then they start including you. They say that let's involve Naomi, for example, right? Or Vicky, for example. Or Rico, for example. We got two Ricos here with different spellings in this room. Right? So let's start including them in the conversation, because there's going to be something that they're going to add value to us, because they've been adding some value in terms of effectiveness. Then once they start including and involving you, then you start providing HR solutions that make strategic business decisions. Now you're sitting in the same room as them, right? When they include you, you're sitting at a table. When you sit at a table, you have the opportunity to start providing real-time value-added consulting, right? So you provide solutions. Look at total solutions. Can be fundamental solutions, could be total solutions, can be very foundational, right? And once you start providing that and they feel the impact is strong, then they say that, wow, this guy is so good at providing solutions that are so total that I'm going to start empowering the person. And that's when the empowerment occurs. The business empowers you. Say that, we know you're empowered to take the picture throughout the whole session. Because he knows exactly what he's doing, he's included in it, he's sitting on the table, you don't have to tell him what to do. He essentially ensures that at the end of the day, Vicky is going to get a finished product that's so perfect that we're going to have excellent results out of this. Right? And then once you start empowering you, then you start taking ownership. When people start empowering you, what do? You start owning it. If you don't want to own it at your choice, then you never go up the continent. But once you own it, then you start making ownership of that, make strategic business decisions. So you own decisions that are strategic to the organization, right? And once you start taking ownership and you're getting yourself involved, you're getting your hands dirty and making things happen, then what happens ideally is the partnership. Right? That's when they say you're a partner, equal partner to me. Right? And that's what business partnering is all about. It's actually a journey that you take. It's a continuum that you take. It is not something that happens overnight. And I can give you examples of situations where, when I start with a business, I'm actually at a question stage, the foundational level. And it takes me a while to get to even to a including or even HR solution stage. So with different partners, the stages are going to be different, right? Where are you all at? Some of you all. How many of you all are at the partnership level? How many of you all think that you're truly at the partnership level? So there's nothing wrong being at whatever stage, right? It's a matter of getting up the continuum, right? With different partners, we're going to get into different levels.
Yeah, just a comment on the continuum. When I think about the continuum, there's application at every level within the organization, and even at my level as well. And so I'll share with you a quick story. And so part of the role that I have is working with the compensation committee, for example. We essentially broke trust with the compensation committee over the last few years or so. And we are rebuilding back that trust. So when I first came into the organization a year and a half ago, we were being told what to do. We were being told what to do. Here's a plan. Here's what we're going to do on bonus caps. Here's what we're going to do on severance. Here's what we want on LTI and the inclusion of certain elements in LTI. We were being told what to do. So for the last year, I've been listening and spending some time with them. Well, why is that? Why do you want an LTI program that's different? Why do you want to cap the bonus targets? Listening, seeking understanding. And then from there, start to consult with them to improve effectiveness. I said, well, there's 3 options that we have here in order to work on the severance plan, for example. You can take this approach, and we'll have this impact. You can take that approach, and there's some negative consequences, and you can take this approach. Here's the one that I recommend. I'm like, oh, let's consider that. Start having a conversation. And they started including me in the conversation from there. He says, oh, this guy's got some value that he's adding to the conversation. He knows what he's talking about. That's helpful. We actually think we trust him. Not sure yet, but I think we trust him. This is what's happening in this continuum in that conversation. And then we came back with some recommendations about 4 to 6 weeks ago. Here are the solutions that are adding strategic impact. Yeah? And part of that we've added to our design going into 2014 and beyond. And I will share with you that that's where I am. Kind of right there with the compensation committee in particular. Yeah? I'm not at the partnership level. We're not there yet. Because we just rolled out a solution that we co-developed. I think that works. At the same time, I don't have the results or the track record yet to say that I'm fully partnered or have the full ownership to make the next impact. Not fully empowered by them just yet. We're working towards that, but we're right there. So the point that I wanted to make with you is it happens at every level in the organization. From my relationship to the compensation committee, to my relationship with Rory, to my relationship with my peers as well, still working up and down this continuum with each of them, just like many of you are with your business partners as well.
I'm going to give you another example. And since Darrell's getting into China, and in China there was no salary structures, right? People had VP titles who are actually at level 4 in the organization. Everything was in a mess, right? So the first thing we did was, at that point of time, Matt Martin hired me into the organization, and the first trip I had to make, the second week of my job, was to go to Beijing, right? And I went to Beijing, and people looked at me like strangers, right? They say that, you don't know anything about the market. What do you know about what you're doing, right? And then we also had issues that time combining the ATI and AMD together, the mergers that we had to do between the 2 organizations. Right? We have different benefits and different programs and so on. And I'm going to give you a bit of Beijing, maybe I'll give you a bit of Shanghai example. So I was seated, so because of the ATI and AMD operates differently, I was with basically a business partner, HR business partner in Markham, right? And she has to make decisions on every single thing. She wants to know every single thing. So she came to me and said that, when you told me there's a gap between the ATI engineers and also the AMD engineers, is there a real gap or not? Why should I be moving? At the time, ATI was having a structure that's around here, and AMD was having around here. And she was not willing to move out the structure because the cost is going to be high. So I had to sit with her, and she was asking me questions. How do you benchmark the data? Where do you get your data from? What's the delta? What's the compare ratio? And so forth. Every single detail. And what I did at my questioning stage is I took a spreadsheet, right, and did a live meeting and went through every single person painfully, right? After the 25th person or so, she said, okay, I trust you, right? I don't need to look at the rest of the 500 transactions that you have, right? And then after that, she looked at the proposal, right? The foundation was there, and then she started listening, right? Now once she is comfortable, the foundation exists, she said, okay, tell me what you want to do. And this was my recommendation, right? And then she basically essentially said that, okay, this is what I want to do. So now it's my time to listen, right? And then we work out on something that's workable for both of us. So if we look at it, for us to get to a level where we have to fix some of the gaps we had in terms of compensation and benefits, in Shanghai, for example, and even in Beijing to a certain extent, it goes through that continuum itself. Sometimes it's painful, but you have to go through it, right? If you don't do it, you take a shortcut, you're not going to be successful at the end of the day in business partnering. Sometimes your partner is just testing you, right? Let's look at the next slide. Next slide is another exercise. We're going to give you about 5 minutes on this exercise. Please pick one of your business partners that you consistently interact with. It could be one of you in the room or your external partner. Identify where you are in the continuum of effectiveness. Are you at the question stage, listening stage, or included or empowered? And then describe what you did there, your success criteria. What are your success criteria to move from one continuum to another? And then describe your challenges you went through and share your experience on the table, at your table. So we're going to basically, this is basically talking about one of the experiences, but I'm going to skip this experience and get to the next slide. And then if we need to, we can cover it as an example later on, right? Now, if you look at this continuum itself, one of the key things that comes out is if you're trying to do strategic work, one of the elements that pops out is, you want to build one more time? Is building influence. That's very critical, right? At the end of the day, one of the key elements of business partnering is building influence. And by doing strategic work, how do you build influence? Next slide. One of the foundations for building influence is the behavior ourselves, right? Whether we have the ownership to the situation or not. Remember, your business and your partners can smell you very well, right? Whether you have ownership or not, they know it by instinct. Correct or not? If you really mean it, they know it. If you don't mean it, it's a lip service, they also know it. So you have to mean it. It's the behavior aspect of it. And how do you measure that from an objective manner? Next, Bill. Assume responsibility. When there's an issue or there's an area to be worked on, you assume responsibility to it. You don't wait. You don't wait to be told. You don't wait for people to ask for volunteers. Right? Second, Bill. Adding value. Remember we mentioned about strategic. It's basically adding value. You need to add value to your partner. If you don't add value, you will not be able to influence people. And the last bill is leveraging your partnership. What does that mean? Leveraging partnership means, in a more detailed manner, that manner is that challenging your business, giving them insights, asking them questions, are they solving the right problem or not? Are they looking at the right situations? Getting them to think. Getting them to basically make the right decision at the end of the day. And that's what I mean by leveraging your partnership. Not doing what they want, not being the yes man. Right? And that's the key element of it. Now if you go to the next slide, doing strategic work. So influencing is a foundation, right? They can smell you, whether you can influence or not, and some of the actions that you do. Now doing strategic work is basically, next bill, is the approach. How do you do strategic work? It's the approach that you take. Next bill, strategic thinking. Are you thinking strategically? Now strategic thinking is applicable, later on we'll give you an example, where it's applicable at all levels in the organization. Right? Even a person who waits at the entrance of the hotel when you come to the hotel itself is a strategic role the person plays, whether he thinks strategically or not, how to help the person. Next bill. So what does strategic thinking mean? It's understanding the business problem, statement and business plan. Right? So for example, yesterday I came down to the hotel. The first thing I look out for is that does the guy who's waiting at the lobby understands the need of me or not, me coming in a wheelchair. That's the first thing, right? You need to understand your customer needs. What's your business needs? And it can be a customer who's coming into the organization. I'm a business customer, if you really look at it, right? I'm going to give you business. If I have a good experience, I'm going to come back again. If I don't have a good experience, I'm not going to come back again, right? So knowing that is very important. And understanding the business plan. Next, Bill. Does the business understand their problem statement, business plan? So sometimes business comes to you and tell you that I have this problem. Please go and fix the problem for me. But sometimes that's not really the problem, right? It's something else could be the problem. Or they could be asking you to fix a problem that's really not aligned to the corporate goals that we have. It's not going to impact the financials. It could be their personal goals they want you to accomplish. So it's very important that does the business understand the problem statement and the business plan they are trying to work on. That's very critical. That's where we start asking that question, strategic thinking, right? Understand their problem they are telling you and then question to make sure they understand their own problem statement itself. Next, Bill. And then are the company and the business strategy aligned? You want to make sure that the problem that the business is giving you and the strategy that the business unit has, are they aligned or not? Next, Bill. Impact of the internal and external environment factors. What are the strategic data saying? Now, if somebody tells you, I got this problem, I got a turnover issue in the organization. Now, what do? Immediately work on the turnover issue? You need to look at the turnover numbers. Right? Maybe there's no turnover issues at all. But maybe there's engagement issues, morale issues, rather than turnover issues. That can amount to turnover in the future. Right? So look at the data. Look at what are the leading and lagging indicators. Use what Cheng Boon is doing. Right? The data mining aspect of it. The HR metrics. Next slide. Then you look at impact, company, long-term and short-term business viability and financials and the value of the system. What does that mean? At the end of the day, if I solve this problem, what is the value that I bring to the organization? What's the financial impact I bring? Now, if the financial impact is going to be minimum, maybe that's not a priority at the end of the day, right? But if the impact is huge, like the payroll savings that we talk about, right? If you can save 1% of your payroll, imagine the millions of dollars we save, right? Then it's worth going for it, right? That's where you prioritize. So when your business gives you 100 problems, this is what I usually tell people, right? When a business gives you 100 problems and you try to solve all the 100 problems, you'll never be successful, right? Because you'll fail in every one of it because you're stretched too thin. But when the business gives you 100 problems and you find the top 3 problems that are most impactful and you solve that problem for them, the balance of the 97 problems, they just forget about it. They forgive you for it because the 3 are the one that makes a huge impact for you. So that's what strategic thinking is all about, right? Now once you have done strategic thinking, we go to the next bill. Using strategic data. We spoke about using strategic data already, right? Cheng Boon is our key guy for that. Next slide. There's nothing coming up. Okay. What's next is strategic planning. Now you have done the strategic thinking, you need to provide strategic planning. The solution to the problem. Right? How do you do that? Next, Bill. We spoke about the top. Form a cross-functional HR team to develop the holistic solution. Remember the John example? What did John do? Did he form a team? He didn't form a team. He became a hero, right? He thought he's going to be a Superman, right? And he's going to solve the business or the problem of the business. But if he formed a team, he would have more sort of what? Realized that there's more to it than just what he thinks it is. So form a team to provide holistic solution. Remember, we are a collective group of people who are highly intelligent, and when we come together, we produce results that are practically, we cannot believe that we came with that solution, right? We can do miracles with that. as an individual, we might not be able to produce miracles, but as a group, we can. That's the reason we're grouping together for the next 3 days, because we're going to do miracle stuff, right? Miracle solutions. Think about it in that context and you will, right? It's a mindset. Next, Bill. Create through brainstorming and critical thinking impact HR solutions to the business plan, right? So as a team, discuss through, right? Brainstorm. How are you going to create impact? How do you create synergy? How do you come up with one solution? Remember, the holistic solution is what is going to solve your problem. A TA solution is only going to solve a TA person's problem. A CMB solution will solve a CMB person's problem. John's problem will solve only John's problem. But it's not going to fix an organizational issue, right? It's not going to be a permanent fix. So we need to make sure that we create it through brainstorming and anticipate enablers, and it's effectively through strategic data. So remember, when you build holistic solutions, you need to identify enablers. What does that mean? It means that what makes things happen. Who are the people that make things happen? What are the process that makes things happen? We don't have automation. Does it mean we cannot do something? Is Stephen in this room? Oh, he's doing the interlock. Okay. So Stephen and me were yesterday having a conversation, a couple of us, and Stephen said that, you know, I'm going to miss my training with Mark Pearson on what he calls speed of trust, because 3 hours I'm going to interview people. So what's the question I asked to Stephen? Do you remember? What was the question?
Can we do it in the other time? It's the constraint.
Take away the constraint. Start with a white sheet of paper. If you have a constraint, don't live by the constraint. Question the constraint. Start with a white sheet of paper and say that, can we do it at a different time? And immediately you enable yourself already, right? Don't wait for people to put constraints on you. Remove the constraint and enable yourself to do things differently. And then use effective strategic data. Use your ER and IR sensing and other formal, informal sources. Now, what does ER and IR mean? Who's the most intelligent person to give you the best solution to a HR problem or a business problem? Who can give you the best solution? Sorry? Louder?
Is it finance?
Finance could be one. Who else?
Employees.
Employees.
Yeah, employees.
Right? I can tell you that in my days when I was doing compensation and benefits, it is not the best compensation plan that you come up with is going to give you the best effectiveness. It's actually what employees are looking for and balancing with business needs. So I used to sit in the cafeteria and talk to the employees and ask them questions about what do you think, what is important to you, what is critical, how do you think the design should be. And at the end of the day, you realize that it is not increasing the benefit by $100, $200, $1,000 that makes a difference. It is how the policy and how we manage it makes a difference. For example, like when you have a program like medical program, sometimes we put certain boundaries and limits onto it. That makes it very difficult to be practiced or utilized. Taking that boundaries out or modifying the boundaries makes a huge level of satisfaction increase among employees. So sometimes doing that sensing helps in that process.
Yeah, let me make a quick comment here. So just to connect the dots on a few things that happen. I try and do this all the time, and I try and do it on a pretty regular basis with many of the trips that I make. So this trip in particular, for example, from Taiwan to Suzhou, to Shanghai, to Beijing, to Singapore, now here, I'm going to have one-on-ones with many of the people in the regions and the business leaders. I'm going to have roundtables with many of the business leaders and critical folks who are leading organizations. I'm going to talk to new hires as well. And so I'm developing a sense of the people and what's happening so I can bring perspective. Those conversations are more than just, hi, how are you, and what's going on. Those conversations are about what's the constraint. Do you understand the business context? When we roll out a strategy regarding professional graphics and taking market share, does that relate to you? What are you going to do with that in Beijing? What are you going to do with that in Singapore? does that actually turn into something tangible? So up and down the strategic levers of the organization, from corporate strategy to implementation to employee perspective, it's what I'm doing. I'm always sensing the organization. And so my encouragement to you is do not underestimate the power of that so that you have relevant context for what we do. I'll give you another quick one. And so just as John Byrne is the voice of the customer, Rory looks to HR as the voice of the people. Yep. And so if we are always behind our desk or behind our computers and not engaging with employees on a regular basis and having a sense of what's going on, how can you really be the voice of the people? We have surveys, yes, we have formal mechanisms. But how do we bring both formal and informal mechanisms together to have a perspective on the organization? That's a big part of our role.
Okay, perfect. Let's build the next one. Validate HR strategic plan with the business and real time and after the plan session. What it means is that when you build solutions, right, and you build your plans, bounce it off with the business, right? You have the sensing data, all the information that flows in, but bounce it off with the business and see whether is it hitting the right solution or not. Are you solving their problem or not? If not, you'll be solving a problem that you think they are solving, but not the business thinks you're solving, right? And prioritize and course correct if needed. So if you think that there are too many solutions, prioritize which has the most impact, and you need to do a bit of course correction if the solution is not working out well. And you're going to do a bit of that tomorrow too, right? So some of these models you'll be using tomorrow because you're going to have the enabling session, and some of it requires you to basically do prioritization and also some of the course corrections that you need to do. Next, Bill. Build next level plans, metrics and timeline. Once you have validated with your business that yes, this is works and this is exactly what you're looking for, then you build your plans. And then the last thing you need to do is very, very important is execute, track and feedback. Feedback is very important, right? Execute is also important, right? But you need to make sure that you listen to whether is it effectively addressing the issues or not. On paper it might be, but in actual it might not. So you might need to go and do that piece of it. Everything we do is important to get feedback. Feedback is actually a gift, right? So it's very important we seek feedback as much as we can. Next slide. And when you look at all these things together, you can see how you can effectively influence and build your partnership. And one of the reasons why we are touching on this topic is influencing skills, right? Effective influencing is very important in our role as a business partner. When I say business partner, it doesn't mean HR business partner. It could be COEs, it could be the service center, it could be any one of us. Next slide. So how do we do business? How do we get strategic in our daily work? Meeting and sit down and just listen and dream about your chicken rice. Or you can worry about whether you're going to get your tandoori chicken or something of that kind, right? Or you can be actually asking questions, right? Engaging with the content of the discussion. Will this plan achieve the business results? Does the logic of the argument make sense? So consistently asking questions to educate yourself and getting your partners and your business to think about it. It's actually being strategic. And it can happen at any level in the organization. So don't sit down in a meeting and be quiet. Ask questions. Ask questions to help yourself and ask questions to help others, right? And that is being strategic at the end of the day because you're adding value. Let's go to the last slide, and we're coming closer to the end, and I promise Mac that I will close it by 11:15, and that's what we're trying to do. Now, Art of Strategic Planner is basically three aspects of it. It's a science, there is a methodology, and it's data driven. If you notice the process we went through, there's a methodology to it, there's no intuition to it, right? And it's all data driven, we make decisions based on data. It's an art, having the right aptitude, relationship and also courage. The courage piece is very important. Darrell, do you want to share something on the courage?
Yeah, just sort of a note on the courage. I had a conversation with David Ulrich, and many of you, how many people know David Ulrich? Okay? So let me explain. So there was about 4 people in the room that understood David Ulrich. David Ulrich is a professor. He is one of the HR sort of master thinkers, if you will. He is a professor at the University of Michigan, and he's written many books on HR. And part of one of the books, one of the foundations he wrote on, was The Art of Strategic Business Partnering. And what is it? He's also talked about the HR model and how it will progress over time as well. And so he's one of the forward thinkers in HR. Yep. And so in my conversation with him, also had a sort of learning session with him as well, in a one-on-one. And we spent a lot of time on the art of business partnering. And he essentially said, 2 things that I took away from the conversation. It's one thing to have the business acumen, and it's one thing to be there at the table. It's one thing to have the position, authority, etc. But where HR, corporately worldwide, tends to fall down is in the courage piece. So why do I say that? Because it's one thing to have the position, you're at the table, etc. But if you're sitting quietly at the table and you don't say anything, you haven't really made an impact. Yeah? It takes risk. You've got to take some risk in order to get in there and mix it up with the business. You have to be informed in order to mix it up with the business, in order to be credible as well. And the issue is really about courage. It's more about personal attributes than it is about the function. So it's where the function comes together, and then we have the position at the table. The question is, what do you do with it? How do you show up? Do you have enough courage in order to challenge the business, stick your nose in, or are you more comfortable, as we were joking, sort of being a yes man? Yep. Are you comfortable enough to agitate? And that's a personal sort of component. And the second piece that he talked about was this. Often HR is very comfortable in the how. Yeah? So we come up with a strategy, HR then says, okay, here's how we're going to go do it. The challenge for HR and the challenge for us as leaders in the organization is to figure out the why. The first question, not just the execution bit, but the why. Yeah? Why do we need more software? Or skills and capabilities? Why do we need to diversify our portfolio? What are the implications of that? Helping figure out the why is the next frontier for HR. You've got to do the basics well, but we also have to show up with courage. So from an HR standpoint, when we go back to the values that we look at for highly valued HR professionals, a big part of that and how we show up is around courage. The words courage were on that page. And I think that's one of the key things that differentiates HR business partners and their impact around the world. Yeah? Do you have the ability to get in there and have a point of view with the business, and then to hold your own in that discussion and debate, such that they will listen to you, and then you can start shaping outcomes for the business? That's what we're after. That's the brand of HR we want to practice. That's where we're going.
Thank you, Darrell. And the last piece is a process, like what Nicola said. It takes time, right? Don't be patient about it, but don't take for life to do it also, right? You might lose the confidence of the business like what John did, right? John took too long, right? He didn't build the relationship and so forth. So take the process of building the continuum itself, going up the ladder of business partnering. And if you follow these 3 rules, the science, the art, and the process, I think you'll be very successful in the role that you're doing, right? Success is very much depending on you. You need to enable yourself to be an effective business partner. Thank you. Any questions? We can take a couple of questions before we end the session.
Just the general one, we get the slides of this question. Disclosed, you don't understand the full picture.
Well, it's a good question. I think I think it's a good question. And there's a point of view, there's a period of time, yeah? And there's a period of time where, and I'll do it this way. If you're sort of 2 weeks into the job, and you're asking questions about how an APU works, yeah? I think that's fine. If you are 5 years with AMD, and you don't understand what an APU is, that's a problem.
Okay.
Yep. And so my point is there is a continuum. And my advice to you would be to, very early in your career, very early in your position rather, sort of ramp up on the business and start to understand it very quickly. Because that's really about listening, gaining that foundation, so that you can have the next conversation. Yeah? So for example, if I'm a year in to AMD, and I don't understand an APU, and I don't understand what the embedded business is all about, and how we're shifting to the semi-custom business as well, and the gross margin impacts, how can I have a conversation with Lisa about the portfolio? Yeah? So there's a period when we've got to ramp up the conversation and ramp up our own knowledge and do our own homework in order to be credible with the business to have the right conversations. So not giving you a direct answer because there's no magic, but there's a period of time where invest early when you're in a new role, ask all the questions, ask a lot of questions, do all the reading to come up with the curve pretty quick.
And if you haven't done so, then obviously trying to do it
Yeah.
yeah, somehow differently, but not openly.
Yeah, and even times like, for example, there are technology questions that come up today that, for example, are nuanced sort of for me. When they come up like that, I take it offline with some key people.
Okay.
So, for example, my strategy mentor is Raj Nayak, right? My finance mentor at AMD is Scott Kemp in GBU. I go to him and ask him about, okay, this gross margin and this shift, what's happening and why. And so I'm not going to go through all of that necessarily in a staff meeting, but that's part of my homework to make sure that I understand it. And so I do that offline sometimes. So over time, you find that there's less need to take it offline, but you got to invest early.
So needing to find mentors for each of the aspects maybe is another good advice.
Cover your gaps.
Yeah, cover your gaps. Okay.
Cover your gaps.
Yeah, so if I can say something to do with courage, it's actually I experienced it on the very first day that my manager, my leader pulled me to a meeting. So I wanted to say something, I wanted to ask something, but then all the evils in my mind say that, come on, this is just your first day, your first meeting, so keep quiet. So I hold back. And I told that to Florence that, I told Florence that I have so many things to say, but maybe I don't have that courage, I just keep quiet. And she encouraged me, say, come on, you can speak up. I did that even the very first meeting. And then the very second meeting that she pulled me in, they were talking about numbers, about retention, and I speak up actually. I took that courage, I share my experience, and I made some suggestions. And to my surprise, after the meeting, few of that head of department, they came to me, they said, that's a very value-added questions, and they said, and you sharing with us very good experience. Actually, I was surprised. I took the risk and the courage.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great example.